Hi everyone, how are you doing? I hope you all are great. Today we will finish up our lesson on the commas. So first you log in using the eplusstudent.com. Click on your name, move on to language at the grade 6. Chapter is commas, lesson is commas reviews. Okay, so we will start now. So you use a comma to separate the name of a person being spoken to from the rest of the sentence. So just like how we have here, thank you, Bella. You have to put a comma in between thank you and Bella. And if it happens to be like the second sentence that you have thank you and then you still have like additional information, you have to also put a comma after the name of the person and then you continue the rest of your sentence just like this. Use commas after words like yes, no, well, and many others when they are followed by a complete sentence. So, as long as you are followed by another sentence, you have to make sure that you add the comma. So, let's say yes, comma, I am coming. Okay, so that's like a full sentence. So it could be no, it could be well, it could be any word, just words like this that you have to make sure that you separate with the comma before you continue up the rest of the sentence. So you have to take note. Yes, that sounds great. Okay? So also we use commas after mild interrupters like oh, you use a comma after that. What a stunning sunset. So if you have like mild interruption like this, you have to make sure that you put comma between the O and then the word that is coming up. So you put comma here and you have your remaining sentence, what a stunning sunset. So we have used commas around an interrupter, which is a word, phrase, or clause that adds additional information, additional, unessential, and information to the sentences. Okay, so if you're having like interrupters that is giving you like additional information or non-essential information, so you have to put a comma. So like you, of course, may have a different opinion. So after you put comma, of course you put comma. So it's like interrupters. So you have to make sure that you include that comma. So we have used commas to set up phrases that use the words not or unlike to qualify adjacent texts. So we have Alexander the Great was Macedonian, not great. So if you're like having not or unlike, you have to make sure that you put a comma before words like that. Okay, so just like Tara, unlike Megan, finds chemistry fascinating. So you can see that after this, there's a comma, then comma, and you continue your sentence. So you have to put comma to set up some phrases. All right. So you use commas to separate three or more items in a series. Put a comma after each item in the list except for the last one. So if you have a series, you have to put a comma in between all the series to separate them except the last one. The last comma in the list right before the coordinating conjunction is called an Oxford comma or zero comma. The zero comma is sometimes considered optional, but most style guides demand it. So you have to put a comma after each series except the last. So you see just like red, white, and you know this is the last one. So you just put a comma before the coordinating conjunction. You do not need to put a comma afterwards, the and. So we have red, white, and blue are the colors of the American flag. Expression that consists of pairs of words such as thunder and lightning and bread and butter are generally treated as single items. So you cannot separate these words because they are like treated as single item. They go together. So it's like saying college costs typically include tuition, room and board, and textbooks. So you cannot put a comma in between the room and board because they're already treated as one. So you do need to add your comma. Okay. So when it comes to dates, you have to put a comma in between the day and the year. So use a comma after the day and in between the day and the year. All right. Also use the comma after the year unless the date ends the sentence. So if it's ending the sentence, then you don't need to put a comma after the year. But if it gives you like more additional information after that, then you can put a comma after the year. So just like January 1, 2001. So you can see that there's more sentence after this. Okay, so that's why the comma was added. But unlike October 2, 1869, it's ending the sentence, so you don't need to put a comma after the year. Alright, so moving on, we have when the name of a city is used with the name of its state or country, you have to use a comma after the city. Also use a comma after the state or country unless it ends the sentence. Okay? So we have Chicago, Illinois is known as the Windy City, right? So you can see that in between Chicago and Illinois, we have a comma. And after Illinois as well, we have a comma. That's because we have additional sentences, okay? That's why. But unlike the next one, you can see that it's ending, Greece is ending the sentence. So you don't need to add a comma after Greece. You just have to put a comma in between the states and country or city and country. Okay. So moving on, we have in a compound sentence, you have to use the comma after the coordinating conjunction that joins two independent clause. So of course, you know that if you're joining two independent clauses with a coordinating conjunction, any of these over here, you have to make sure that you put a comma before the coordinating conjunction. And in a complex sentence, if a dependent clause comes before an independent clause, you have to use a comma after the dependent clause. So dependent clauses, we have some ways that you can note them. Okay, so they start with the subordinating conjunction such as although, as, because, and all of these over here are the subordinating conjunction. So once you see any of these starting the sentence, you know that that's a dependent clause starting it. So you have to put a comma after the first sentence. Just like over here, if she ever gets a chance, Terry would love to visit the Egyptian pyramids. So you can see that it starts with if, which is a subordinating conjunction. All right, so let's look at some examples and go to the test. So we will just move on to the test and you can just share your answers with me if you know them. Okay? So we have correct the text by inserting one comma. Note in this skill, serial commas are not optional. Okay? So we have while she served as the first lady of Argentina, Eva Perón worked to improve conditions for women and the poor. So is it the first or the second? So we have what? The first one, okay? Starting with a subordinating conjunction. Oops. Vera spread the ink on the mailing label, so I'll have to reprint it. So what is gonna be the right one? Because we have oops, Vera smeared the ink on the mailing label. So you have to insert one comma. Tell me what you think is the right answer. So we have the second, right? Okay. Then seaweed doesn't sound like an appealing food, I'm afraid, but it's loaded with vitamins and minerals. First or the second? All right, so we have the second. While the new regulations were simply meant to prevent the spread of foodborne illnesses, many chefs found them burdensome. So, which of them? So, we have what? The first. So, what do you think is the right one here? We have to insert two commas. So, Hanoi, Vietnam has had many names throughout the centuries, including Tak Long, which means soaring dragon. First or the second? So we have what? The first one. This restaurant, as you will recall, won't seat us until everyone is present. Two commas. Which is the right one here? Okay, so option two. Thanks for your answer. Alright, so a nuclear power station exploded in Ukraine on April 26, 1986. So one common mistake here. What's that? So we have the first. Okay. So insert one comma here. Before the bed and breakfast opened, the only place to stay around here was at the motor launch just off the highway. First a second. All right, so the first. Okay. So after you later and rinse the dog, put him back in the kennel line. First to second. Okay, so we have what? The second. Wow, experts have found that workers who sit at their desks all day have an increased risk of diabetes, cancer, and obesity. First, a second. All right, so we have the first one. So that's it for our lesson under commas. Can you tell me if you have any questions? All right, so if you have no questions, we'll end here. Try to complete this lesson if you haven't done it, and see you all next time. Bye.